Welcome back on and everybody to the newest episode of the Strictly NFL podcast. I'm joined by a new co-host, a good friend, a new Stricklandian. I guess not really new. We've been here for pretty,
About him like a
couple
month
months.
or so. Yeah.
You know him from a lot of the articles and stuff that we get published on here from him. My good friend Desmond Novak. The program around here is not going to change. We're going to be tackling the same stuff, covering Giants, Jets, everything around the game, whatever comes to mind. But we're going to be doing together. So without further ado, before we hop into a lot of the other content for this podcast, BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything football. We all know the preseason is, we're in the midst of things right now. It's going to wrap up this next week, and college is starting off this weekend. So BetOnline is going to have every stat, every matchup, and live odds and spreads while games are being played. If you think you know your stuff, you could get in on their winner-take-all $300,000 NFL Survivor pool for the upcoming season. And when the game's over, you could head over to the online casino and get in on a game of blackjack or poker, or unwind with one of over 150 slot games. Head over to the website today and use the promo code BLEAV, capital BLEAV, and get in on all the action. Bet online. The game starts here. Well, the Giants had preseason game 2 this week. We finally got to see some live reps from starters against legitimate competition. And it was a bit up and down, a bit frustrating.
Yeah, you could definitely definitely say that.
Yeah. The one thing that I want to start off with is, there's an elephant in the room, and we'll just go ahead and attack it real quick with Daniel Jones. What are some of the things that you thought to yourself watching that?
So unfortunately I wasn't able to watch it live because of some work stuff, and I've watched a lot of the clips from it.
Yeah.
And one of the biggest things I've noticed was obviously the pick six he had, of which still making the same mistake of not knowing when to get rid of the football, not knowing, and just honestly, just taking too long to scan the field. Like, he had Theo Johnson open on that play and just didn't see him, ran out of the pocket, tossed it right to the defense. Yeah, I mean, it's just mistakes like that can't really be happening in year 6, let alone in year 6 for a dude that's making what, 40 million now, not to mention in the preseason. It's just like it was a tough watch.
Yeah, it's kind of it reminded me of one throw. I believe it was either going into year 2 or going into year 3. We started off the season against the Steelers in primetime on ESPN.
Yep, I know what you're talking about.
And we were right by the goal line. He's rolling to his left. Not really rolling to his left this time, but he was facing left. That's where he threw the ball to. And in that game against the Steelers, he gets lit up while he's trying to throw the ball. Ball goes up in the air, interception. We know the whole deal with that. This play, whatever it is, 4 years later, 3 years later, it's preseason. You haven't played in 2 months more than everybody else. I get the whole 9 yards.
Yeah.
But man, I'm just tired of seeing it. Like I'm tired of seeing that stuff.
Yeah, it's really frustrating to just kind of the fact that we still have to deal with this, of like, not even saying this is like kind of an indictment on Daniel Jones as a quarterback, but more of so of like, we watched so many quarterbacks in the league come and go, barely getting a chance to prove if they're actually good or not. Like, Justin Fields is a good example of that. Like, he's had a lot of great moments. He's had a lot of bad moments, never really had anything consistent around him. The second the Bears had an opportunity to move on, they moved on. Yep. The Giants have had several opportunities to move on from Daniel Jones in the now going to be 6 years they've had him, and they've continuously refused to. And now I'm not even going to give them like flack for re-signing him after 2022, because like, even with how things have gone, like at the time, that was the right thing to do. You can argue the money, but bringing him back was the right thing to do. But I mean, it's been one good year, I even say just like above average year out of 5, soon to be what could be 6. Like, how many more chances is he going to get?
I guess if you want to put quotations around encouraging, you could do that also. But one thing that I found encouraging was the downfield stuff that we were that we were
Yeah.
calling. I don't know if it's a Dable influence thing in terms of what's being called down to down. I don't know if it's just more trust in O-line to hold up, or a philosophical thing where they're like, "Hey DJ, we don't care what you're seeing. If we call a shot play and you aren't fully confident in it, we don't care. You're throwing that anyway." Like I don't know if it's
Yeah.
that type of a thing, but there was a lot more shots this game that was notable to me, and I thought some plays were thrown really well from DJ. Honestly, I thought most were still thrown poorly. But this isn't the kind of game where I'm like, okay, the throws were bad, so therefore I'm discouraged. The stuff that discouraged me was the stuff we talked about earlier with the bad decision to not get the ball out of bounds. The first play of the game, like that almost interception from Stingley,
Yeah.
that seemed to me like a predetermined route, so I wasn't really up in arms about that decision. Um, all in all, I think the run games I think is going to be strong. I think the O line is very well rounded this year, which we'll get into a little bit more. We'll be touching to positional group stuff, but I am cautiously optimistic for this offense as long as Daniel Jones can kind of choreograph and conduct things and not have to be the guy leading, this offense down to down.
Yeah, and I think that this will be a good year for that of like I feel like the receiving core, both in terms of like, receivers and tight ends, is probably at least looking to be the most consistent it's been in a while. The offensive line is looking great on paper. I just really hope it holds up in the regular season.
Yeah.
This is his best chance to show that he can just do something at this point of like, because really outside of 2022, he hasn't proven that. And I don't know. I want to be optimistic, but it's just seeing him still making those mistakes is really, it's tough to see. And again, he did have a lot of good moments after that, and I will give him praise for that. But I don't know. It's just so hard to judge Daniel Jones at this point for me.
Yeah. The one thing that I've had a lot of dialogue about on Twitter, and in our Discord, our Patreon, is people not wanting to play Daniel Jones. And for as much as I'll understand the frustration as a fan, over half of a decade seeing this, from a schematic point of view, Daniel Jones is the only quarterback in this room who you can play 11 on 11 football with.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Like, no
You
doubt
are,
about that.
yeah, you are not doing that with Drew Lock. You are not doing that with Tommy DeVito. And for as much of a flaw or as big of a flaw as it is for DJ to not really have great pocket presence when Andrew Thomas is in the lineup,
Yeah.
I mean, you could have 5 Penei Sewells out there and Tommy DeVito will still not have a clue who's rushing him.
Oh, yeah, no.
So
He's even worse when it comes to like the pocket presence
it's
stuff.
terrible. So I don't think that anybody besides Daniel Jones is a reasonable, that it's not a reasonable take to say I don't want Daniel Jones starting because these guys are better. If you're going to bring up the injury clause, you could have that. I personally think it's too big of a year for this team to punt games because of an injury clause.
No, I agree. Because this is kind of the year where like they have to prove that moves like letting Saquon walk and letting Xavier McKinney walk, that those were the right decisions. I've seen a lot of people say that if the Giants aren't good this year and Saquon has a great year in Philly, that could cost Joe Shane his job. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that because I think letting Saquon go, at least for the money he got paid, was the right move in a sense, especially with what they use that money for. But yeah, there's a lot riding on this season for everyone. Daniel Jones, Brian Dable, Joe Shane, and like you said, they can't afford to potentially throw a season for an injury clause.
Yeah. In a more positive light, I think everything with the defense has been pretty encouraging.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Away from probably just cornerback 2. Because I think Dane Belton, I didn't have much faith in him, honestly. I never really liked what I saw on the field from him the last couple of years.
Yeah.
But the stuff that has been reported around him from preseason has been encouraging. A little bit of the stuff that we saw, I was like, okay, that's a bit of a step up. And I have some level of faith that the safety room won't make me go, fuck, where's Xavier McKinney, halfway through the season.
Yeah, I really was not happy about letting Xavier McKinney walk, because kind of the way I look at it is like, yeah, you can save money by drafting someone, but you're going to have to pay that guy eventually. So we're just going to be in an endless cycle of drafting a really good
Yeah.
safety and then just letting them walk. I have a lot of faith in Tyler Nubin, don't get me wrong. And I do think Dane Belton still has some juice, some potential. I've never really seen anything good out of him in against the run, but he's always been a lot of upside, I think, in pass coverage. But even then, it's just he's never been able to put it all together. But I'm hopeful this year. But I really hope that we can put it together without McKinney.
Yeah, my, I guess, biggest gripe with the McKinney decision, and I've rehashed this thousands of times on this podcast, the logic of letting him walk because he was getting paid a high salary. I totally understand it. Like 17 million for a safety. Granted, he's young. He's, I believe, 24.
Yeah.
He wasn't an all-pro. Maybe he gets there over the life of this contract because of how good he was to close the season. But you don't give somebody whatever it was. I think it was 75-ish, 85 million.
Yeah.
I think it was 5 for 85. That's what I believe it was. You need to have the conviction that this guy's going to be an all-pro, right? And if that's not where Joe Schoen was at, that's not where he was at. The fallacy to me is you don't want to pay him 17 million a year, but you would draft somebody top 64 at the same position.
Yeah. Which he could easily, that player you draft could easily turn into a $64 million safety.
Yeah. So the fact, that stuff, it's kind of like 1 + 1 doesn't equal 2, but you're trying to tell me 1 + 1 is 3, and I'm just like, okay, let's just move on, because that's the one questionable thing that I've kind of really had with Joe Schoen this offseason. Every other pick, I either really liked it or it grew on me a lot. Drew Phillips has grown on me a lot. This
I was a little questionable on Drew Phillips, but everything I've heard on him this offseason has been phenomenal.
Yeah. So, and I think the big thing with what we've done is a lot of times this team has been finesse, right? Like from last year, just kind of getting knocked around in how many games was it? Like pretty much every game we lost, and about half the games we won, we got our shit kicked in.
Yeah.
And then the year before that, we were losing trench battles all the time. So I think from the trench upgrades and getting so many players who are at the skill position who are, for lack of a better term, a dog, right? Or, our big hitters, guys who aren't afraid to mix it up, with players who are bigger, right? Like a slot who's not afraid to blitz and stuff like that. I think that inherently has a value that can't be quantified. That's something that I think Drew brings to the table, even though I'm not his biggest fan. I think Nubin brings it to the table big time.
Yeah.
And I'm excited to see these guys maybe potentially swing a game sometimes on a big hit, right? Just something that gets the crowd juiced up, the team juiced up, maybe causes a fumble, something like that.
Yeah, I definitely think the Giants have a good amount of guys like that on, really either side of the ball. Even just someone like John Runyon or Greg Van Roten getting out in the second level, just laying someone out for a block, just especially early on in a game.
Yeah.
That'll set the tone so fast.
Yeah. I love we're kind of ping-ponging back and forth, but I think it's totally fine. We're really kind of taking apart the roster right now. The athleticism on the line, I love it. We know what Andrew Thomas is. Runyon is somebody who I think has a lot of untapped potential in terms of getting this guy moving out in space. That's something that I think Brasillo was fantastic with in Las Vegas with GVR and Illuminor, which obviously, that's been talked about a lot through Giant circles that we brought those guys over. But with how good Runyon has been in pass pro for Green Bay, bringing him into this situation where you can take advantage of that athleticism with a guy who's taught Greg Van Roten, of all people, how to pull and how to get up to the second level. I think internally, I think they bet a little bit on, all right, 3 years, $30 million for John Runyon. Maybe we can make a little tweak here or there with some technique, and maybe we get a value of like 3 years, 50 million, 3 years, 55 million, and kind of elevate him to a higher echelon of guard.
Yeah, I definitely see that. Especially, I'll say, like, I don't know like a whole lot about Carmen Bristol. I've heard all good things. Like, I very seldom have heard anyone say anything bad about him. But it's just compared to the way the people were talking about the offensive line last year, even heading into the season, the way they looked, the way they played, the attitude of a lot of the guys, the comparison like between again last year and this year has me just like so much more excited and hopeful about what this unit could look like, because it's been a very long time since the Giants have had really anything consistent or even just good on the offensive line,
Yeah.
aside for like a couple of players.
Yeah. With the current offensive line that's slated to be there day one, right? You have 4 guys who are proven, at least in the short term, that they have been above average players in this league, right?
Yeah.
Runyon has that pedigree from Green Bay. Illuminor and Greg Van Roten both reached career highs under Brasillo in Las Vegas, and Andrew Thomas is, he is
Andrew Thomas.
He is the pillar, right?
Yeah,
of
exactly.
everything. So you have 4 guys all around JMS, who is the other supposed linchpin, right? Who you are hoping Brasillo makes magic with. And if you get a slightly above average season from JMS, you're looking at a line that's pretty solidified all around, with 3 guys who are young and locked up, and then Illuminor you have for another season with Evan Neal waiting in the wings. Hopefully, I'm praying that he figures his shit out.
Yeah.
So the state of the line is looking up, and we've heard all these positive reports. They haven't even played a snap together, so I'm looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to, maybe there'll be some level of growing pain because they haven't, but you're hearing good things about this line, and the starters haven't played together yet.
Yeah.
Which to me is great news.
For sure. I mean, I'm really interested to see what they end up doing with Evan Neal. There's been a lot of talk of him potentially moving to guard, which I honestly feel like might be the best move for his career at this point. I don't really know, just because the drastic difference in what we saw at Alabama versus what we've seen in the NFL has been just insane to watch. But I thought I saw a report saying that he could like get snaps at center. It might have been like some bullshit, but like it probably was. But just even if there's just the thought of moving him into the interior, because I feel like our backups on the inside are pretty weak this year. Depending on what they decide to do with Josh Ezeudu, I hope they put him back inside, because I cannot stand to watch him at tackle anymore. But just do something with Evan Neal at this point. Like, I don't really want to see him waste away off the bench, but obviously right now that's the correct move, because they have guys who are proven, who are simply better than him. Sure, if Evan Neal becomes what we thought he could be, he'll have the higher upside, but I don't really care about that right now. It's been 2 years of him playing like ass. I'd rather have a more proven guy and let Evan Neal have to fight for his spot back.
Yeah. I think that looking at the situation, I don't know if you have a better option for a swing tackle.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, for sure.
That's just going to have to be like what the reality is for this team. I also think that if you put a gun to my head, is it better for Evan Neal to have to learn offensive guard, or is it better for him to have a redshirt year and then come back next season and fight for the job?
I feel like I do agree with redshirt. I would definitely say redshirt.
That's like, I personally would want them to keep Ezeudu inside. You have Stinney for the other backup guard, and you have Schlotterman for the backup center. 2 guys who they signed not really early, but not late into free agency. So I feel like they had some priority on those guys.
Yeah.
I think the plan is to have him redshirt. Whereas early in the offseason, when I was kind of mapping things out and I did my mock offseason episode on here and all that stuff, I wanted him to be a swing tackle, or, the Illuminor Neal thing is something that I had in that episode. I think I'm not ready to give up on Evan Neal, but I'm also not ready to give you a job this offseason. It's the weirdest. Like, I know that hearing that it's going to be like, all right, Con. So then, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, you don't have faith in him, but you do. Like, where are you at on him? I would rather go down swinging with him at O tackle than concede to guard in year 3. That's where I would
I
be on
definitely get that. I definitely get that. It's just I just don't know like really what's gone wrong with him. Obviously the positional change hurt him. Bobby Johnson is not a good coach. But it's just so tough to judge because it's like I want to have faith in him. Don't get me wrong, and I do think he still has the potential because I can't watch what he was doing at Alabama and be like, oh, that player is just gone now. But it's just I feel like everything has gone wrong for him since he
Yep.
got drafted. Got taken out of his position. Bobby Johnson was his coach.
Injuries.
Yep. It's just everything to the point where I will fully agree that a red shirt is definitely best. And if Andrew Thomas or Luminor go down, you can put him at either tackle spot because now he has experience, like full-time experience at either spot. And then at that point, you just see what happens, I guess.
Yeah. The other part of this team where I was concerned coming into the offseason, but now I'm pretty juiced up to see them week 1 is the interior of the D-line. Obviously, similar to the way we talked about Andrew Thomas, you have Big Dex just holding shit down. What a guy he is. Do you know who the Costco guys are by any chance?
Yes, I sure do.
Okay, have you seen the edit where they asked AJ what his favorite player is in the NFL, and he said it was Dexter Lawrence?
Are you fucking serious?
I'm
Did he actually say Dexter Lawrence?
Yes,
That's
yeah,
fucking sick.
He was like favorite NFL player ever, Michael Strahan. But today, let's go Dexter Lawrence. I was like,
Oh my
fuck yeah,
gosh.
Big AJ. That's what I'm
Yeah.
talking about.
He knows ball, man. That's awesome.
So between Dexter Lawrence, just words don't have to be said about that guy.
Yeah.
Raheem Nunez-Roches, who I thought was a good signing last year. I thought he was overpaid, but he's been pretty consistent throughout not only his career, but last season was pretty good.
Yeah.
DJ Davidson
a very
coming off
consistently solid guy.
Yeah, and he's been on winning teams with the Bucks before. So, Elijah Chapman, who's been a big story around training camp. Jordan Riley, who I love, along with a good friend David Goodman, and DJ Davidson. Those are kind of the 5 main guys right now. You got 2 guys for the nose tackle spot in Jordan Riley, Dexter Lawrence. And then you've got 3 guys rotating for the 2 spots at 3 tech. And I guess your 1 tech also between Raheem, DJ Davidson, and with Elijah Chapman. I was pretty upset that Ryder Anderson got hurt.
Yeah, I feel like he's a guy who's been like kind of fighting to get a consistent role for a while. And then like it finally seems like he could very easily get that, and he gets hurt and now is off the team, right? They waived him.
Yeah. I don't know what the process will be with him through cuts. I don't know if he's eligible to be picked up by another team. I would imagine he is.
Yeah.
But it just really sucks because there not really hype, but there was a decent amount of talk around him this offseason. And Art Stapleton had his tweet where he thought that Ryder Anderson would be running with the ones in the preseason game, and he looked pretty decent. So a little frustrating that you have to draw from the depth over there, especially after trading away Jordan Phillips, right? So that move kind of looks not bad looking back on it because this is a hindsight thing, but unfortunate is a better word. With all that stuff taken into consideration, I'm still pretty excited to watch these guys get after the quarterback with, those 3 edge rushers we got.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, again, don't have to say anything about Dexter Lawrence. Nacho is extremely solid. And like, I've been very excited about Jordan Riley. Everyone on the defensive coaching staff has talked very highly on him. Every time we've seen him in action, at least like in the preseason, he's looked good. I just want him to get that consistent role. And it probably won't happen because he'll be at nose guard or nose tackle with Dexter ahead of him. But like, even if he just gets some snaps here and there, just to really see what he can do. And then Elijah Chapman's another one, had that absurd tackle against the Texans in the second preseason game. I couldn't believe that shit, man.
That's
Really
a
hoping.
play. Sorry to cut you off. That's a play where, like, every college football season they have that list. I think it's Feldman's Freaks, where they just talk about like the most athletic outliers in college football. That's a play where like that alone would net you a spot on that list.
Oh yeah,
the next year.
Yeah,
like,
for sure.
At however much he weighs, and he's a big boy, to hawk down a running back, that was crazy to see.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see if like what we've seen both in training camp and in the 2 preseason games, if that translates to the regular season, because if it is, that's going to be a huge boost to the defensive line, especially considering he's an undrafted guy. Is he from? No, Casey Rogers is the one that's from New York.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, it's a very, like, to a non-Giants fan, they're probably going to look at it and be like, what the fuck are they talking about? But just watching like what we've seen in training camp and preseason and what we know about the guys both on the roster now and the new guys like Chapman, there's a lot to like be reasonably excited about.
Yeah. And there's not, I would say, you look at some of the other D-lines around the league that have made noise throughout the last couple of years, right? Like when the Eagles had 60, 70, whatever sacks it was. The Giants don't have that kind of depth. And I don't think anybody would expect them to have that kind of depth, coming into this season. But a lot of times in recent memory, they've been one deep at certain positions.
Yeah.
And you're looking at pretty much being too deep everywhere. And in some cases, like before the Ryder injury, you could have legitimately made a case that they were 3 deep at D tackle at those spots.
Oh, yeah.
So the D-line as a whole is encouraging. And I don't think we have to touch on edge rushers and whatnot because we all know the deal over there.
Oh, yeah.
One question I had for you was if you had to pick any position outside of quarterback that you think is a swing spot for this team this year, what do you think it is? And after you go, I'll go give mine.
What do you mean by swing spot? Like,
if this room, right? So like not just one person.
Yeah.
If this room hits, we're good.
Definitely defensive line. Like
defensive
for sure.
line? Okay.
Defensive line or honestly corners would be another one. But I really feel like if guys, again, like Jordan Riley, Elijah Chapman, if they can show what we think they're capable of, I mean, that's just an absurd front 5. Brian Burns, Kayvon Thibodeau, Dexter Lawrence, and then like a potentially good Chapman, Riley, Nacho. That's a really solid line compared to like what we've seen from years past, of where like you'll have your top tier guys in the room, like Dexter and Kayvon Thibodeau last year, but outside of that, there's not really much there helping them out. Now they could potentially have that help, and I'm very excited to see where they go.
I gotcha. I would say I was between receiver and secondary for this, but I'm gonna say secondary, and I'm gonna cheat a little because I'm gonna say it's the cornerbacks, and it's not only gonna be Deontay and Cordell Flott, who I'm talking about, but I'm also gonna cheat and throw Isaiah Simmons into this because he is gonna play some nickel according to the reports.
I've heard about that. Yeah.
So between Banks' development, whether Nick McLeod can be a legitimate cornerback too, or if he takes that spot, or if he gets that spot taken, from Cordell Flott. That you got Drew Phillips, you got Isaiah Simmons. I think that cornerback room is the single most important overall position for this team in terms of if this cornerback room hits and these guys hit their 80th percentile outcomes, that is the biggest or the most important spot that I think could happen at. And you look at this team, the linebackers, I think they're ready to go from week 1. Obviously, you know how good Okereke is. I thought McFadden was so good last year. One of the best linebacker pairings in football. Maybe not top 3, top 5, but certainly in the top 12, I want to say.
For sure.
If you get good cornerback play, specifically from just one of McLeod or Cordell Flott, I think the ceiling for this defense goes up immeasurably.
Yeah, I know. I definitely agree. And defensively speaking, behind the defensive line for me personally, that's just because I'm a freak about the offensive and defensive line. Corners is definitely like by far not even close, like second for me. Just again, I really hope that that one of Flott or McLeod can figure it out, because signing a free agent would be cool, but I would really like to just have someone in house pick up that job and show that they're just can consistently play well. Like we've seen flashes from Nick McLeod, flashes from Cordell Flott. Neither of those guys have really shown consistently in the 2 or 3 years now they've been with the team that they can do it. Hopefully now, we'll see if they can.
Yeah, and one thing that I found pretty interesting was throughout the prep for this, I was like, I wonder who could be, a saving grace for us. I don't want to have to draft another cornerback next year. I don't want to. My still okay. My window
Yeah.
wasn't loading. I don't want to have to bank on another year of development for somebody. Who could we bring in and confidently plug and play? I think Tyson Campbell. I don't think he had extended. At least according to Spotrac when I looked this up earlier. I think Tyson Campbell is an unrestricted free agent this upcoming season. And then there is a bunch of other guys like Rasul Douglas. Granted, he's going to be 31 at the time of free agency, but he's been playing at a very high level.